Hello, Year 12, and welcome to the weekly video that we're going to be making, which just outlines in 5 short minutes how to prepare your essay for the following week. So this is the essay which I'd like you to attempt and to write at home and then to send to me on Microsoft Teams. So the question is, how far do you agree with the view that there can be such a thing as a natural good? And this is quite a complex essay title, so we're going to have to explore it in a bit of detail. So the first thing to say is that this is a natural law essay. So this is an essay about the content that you've been learning at home over the last week or at school. So natural moral law is a Christian ethical theory, so propagated by Thomas Aquinas. So the essay is asking this: can there be a natural good? So in ethics, the idea that there's a natural good means that right and wrong, excuse me, right and wrong are found a posteriori in nature. As we take this picture, so this is the idea: through sense experience, we can work out and see an objective, absolute standard for morality. Natural law is the only system that we're looking at that says this. However, there are non-Christian ethical theories that also say this as well. So the first thing that I would do in this essay, very first thing I would do, is just define the question. So the question is set: can there be an objective right or wrong? Now Aquinas is going to say yes, because Aquinas is a Christian. So the natural law tradition says that there is an objective right and wrong discoverable in nature. How do we discover that? Well, we discover it through reason. How can we discover that? Because God has planted a seed of his knowledge within us as we are made in the Imago Dei, the image of God in Latin. Okay, so this is going to be your first few lines, just explaining the nature of the question. Now, some people will disagree and say there's no such thing as a natural good. And if you disagree, you'll be saying things such as good, bad, right, wrong aren't objectively discoverable in the world. They are imposed by us. So you might argue, no, we decide what is right and wrong. It comes from the human brain. And if this is the case, then you're probably going to be a moral relativist. So this is the opposite of the natural law tradition. Okay, so this is what I would begin with then. I would begin by defining the question. How far do you agree with the view that there can be such a thing as a natural good? This is the idea that right and wrong, good and bad, are discoverable in the natural world. God has implanted them within his creation. And remember, natural law doesn't exist just for humans. It also exists for all of God's creation. So there's a good and a bad for the natural world as well. So a good tree, for example, will be one that produces fruits. A bad tree will be one that doesn't produce fruits, as an example. And that's discoverable. So you define the question. Then the second paragraph, or the same paragraph really. You need lots of AO1 explaining natural law. In the ethics unit, really you need a good page or so, which is purely AO1, explaining exactly how the theory works. So this is what I'd be saying. These are the key points that you need to be addressing. Natural law is deontological. It's an absolutist theory. It's also normative, explaining all of those terms. Briefly explain how Aquinas gets his ideas from Aristotle, the idea of the final cause or the telos. It is eudaimonia for Aristotle, so it's flourishing, but for Aquinas, he changes this to the Imago Dei, fulfilling the image that our Creator has designed for us. To talk about telos, purpose underpinning natural law. Moral decisions are only moral if they're made by rational, free-thinking individuals. God is the ultimate end of human life. Being in the presence of God is the human's telos. So you can talk about the 4 tiers of law if you wish to as well. We have divine, natural, revealed, and human. And I'll talk about the principle of synderesis. So the principle of synderesis is our method for working out what good and bad actions will look like. And we do this through, first of all, pursuing good and avoiding evil, and then working backwards. We need to fulfill the primary precepts. So you can list them if you want to, but I just choose one. So that's either worship God, live in an orderly society, reproduce, learn, or defend self and the innocent. And we achieve this by fulfilling secondary precepts, which are principles of action that help us achieve the primary precepts. This is the process known as casuistry. And then you can talk, if you like, a little bit about reason, is what allows us to achieve the secondary precepts, and talk a little bit about the virtues and the vices if you wish to. And I would use an example, so you can use the example of condoms and the Catholic Church. I think that's the best example. Okay, so here is a model paragraph. So natural law is Aristotle, so it's based on Aristotle's idea that all of nature is aiming to fulfill its natural law. All things are moving from potentiality to actuality and aiming to fulfill their natural law or telos. Telos means end goal. Aquinas was inspired by Aristotle, and like Aristotle, Aquinas was a Christian, therefore natural law is a Christian ethical theory. Aquinas changes the final telos of human life from Aristotle's eudaimonia to the Christian Imago Dei. The purpose of life is to fulfill our natural law, which is to live in the image that our Creator has designed for us. Natural law is therefore a normative theory, as it tells us what we ought to do in order to fulfill our natural law. It is also a deontological theory because in reality the Catholic Church issues a set of absolutist unbreakable laws which all must follow. All humans, in order to reach the Imago Dei, should fulfill the principle of synderesis. This is to do good and avoid evil. In order to do this, we must first fulfill our primary precepts, which are worship God, live in an orderly society, reproduce, learn, and defend the self and the innocent. In order to fulfill the primary precepts, we must first work out secondary precepts, which are known as principles of action. This is the process known as casuistry. Therefore, in order to fulfill the primary precept, reproduce, we must not wear condoms. Condoms prevent reproduction. The final cause of sexual intimacy should be reproduction, not pleasure. In order to make this decision, we must first decide to chase the real good of reproduction rather than the apparent good of sexual pleasure. We make this decision by reasoning correctly. We reason correctly by following the virtues and avoiding the vices. For example, if we followed the vice of lust, we would not be fulfilling our natural law, as we would wish to use a condom before marriage. If we followed the virtue of temperance or self-control, we would be following our natural law. So that's an example of the 2 sort of opening paragraphs that really need to explain your AO1. Don't copy these, please. Just use these as a template. And then after that, we just get on to the agrees and disagrees. So I would have maybe 2 ideas or 2 paragraphs which agree with the opinion that you've introduced in your introduction. Maybe 2 disagrees. Each of the paragraphs at the end of them needs to link back to your overall opinion. And then an opinion paragraph with the GCSE structure, just summarizing the points that you've made. So what can you actually talk about then? So here are the AO2 points that I've put into your revision guides, which you have at home. And let's just walk through these now. So, is there such a thing as a natural good? Yes. You could agree that a common understanding of morality is required. So this is the idea that there might not be such a thing as a natural good, but it's good for us to act as though there were one. Because we should all have a agreed set of guidelines on how we should behave. And if you believe that morality is reducible to something in nature, then we can all agree on it. So this is the idea that absolutist or deontological systems are stronger. Okay, 2, most people are in favor of protecting life and defending the innocent. So Aquinas seems to have identified something that is common to all. It does seem to be a natural good. Across every culture, we see people wishing to protect life and defend innocent people. Disagrees. No, there's no such thing as a natural good. Human nature isn't actually good. This is what you could argue. And here we could talk about Thomas Hobbes. We could talk about the idea that the life of man is nasty, brutish, and short. No, maybe we have a natural inclination towards self-preservation. Maybe the only thing that's natural is to be selfish, to care about our own genes or to care about others. And here you could bring in Richard Dawkins. No, it's naive to talk about natural, because the distinction between artificial and natural in the case of things such as sexuality is arbitrary. This is quite a complex point. Don't talk about this if you don't understand it. But if you wish to talk about this, in short, what it's saying is that it's difficult to define what is natural and what's not. It seems to be a decision that we have made. We put some things into the natural category and some things into the unnatural category. For example, the Pope will say that it's wrong to wear a condom because it's unnatural, but then the Pope will get on an aeroplane. An aeroplane, you could argue, is unnatural. God didn't design us to be 10,000 feet above the ground. Okay. Finally, human activity is endangering life on Earth for other species. If human nature is fundamentally good, why are we causing so much pain and so much evil and so much carelessness in the world? Okay, so these are good points to mention. You have 2 critics here, so you could get an A quality essay just from this, but here are some other critics that you could mention. So we've already mentioned Thomas Hobbes. Hans Kung says the idea of natural is naive, narrow, and unhistorical. It's based on arbitrary distinctions, and we've looked at this already. This is the Pope flying an aeroplane example, if you wish to use that. Jean-Paul Sartre, Bertrand Russell, and David Hume, very different philosophers, but they have an agreed perspective on what is natural, and they believe that there's no such thing as natural. We make this up. The only thing that is natural is what we decide to be natural. There's no such thing as an inherent, intrinsic human nature. And finally, we have G.E. Moore. Now, this is quite a complex point, and because I haven't actually taught this to you, don't use it unless you're very confident. But G.E. Moore talks about the naturalistic fallacy, and this is very much related to David Hume's deriving an ought from an is complaint against naturalistic arguments. So this is the idea that just because something is natural doesn't mean it ought to be done. So the classic example for this is rape. Now, nobody thinks that rape is good and ought to be done, but rape, it appears, is natural. It does seem to happen in the animal kingdom. So just because something is natural doesn't mean it is good. Another example is war, murder, killing, eating your own children. This happens in nature. It doesn't mean it's good. Okay, so hopefully that's helpful. If you've got any questions at all, please contact me. And just a reminder that this essay will be due in next Wednesday. So that's Wednesday, the 2nd of December. Okay, thank you, Year 12.